In this video I will show you how to solve the most fundamental question in philosophy and neuroscience: free will versus determinism. And as pretentious this might be, I want to start off with a little game. I have 3 fingers up right now, and I want you to guess which finger is the chosen one. The other fingers will go down, and only the chosen one will remain up. But I want you to be very aware of your decision-making process, okay? So lock in the precise moment you made your choice, okay? 3, 2, 1. Ignoring for a moment that I pointed my middle finger at you, if you picked the wrong finger, you most likely feel that it was just bad luck. But if you guessed right, then there's a part of you who might sense a sense of ownership. And there's probably another part of you who thinks that it was pretty rude to point my middle finger at you. But the real question is, if we now turn back the time and we start this process from the beginning, assuming you don't know already that I'm going to be rude, without knowing the outcome and assuming that the universe has the exact same atomic configuration as before you locked in your choice, would you pick something else? Could I've picked another finger even? In other words, is there a you and a me here who had created different outcomes by actually choosing? Or are we both bound by fate? But Marco, you might say, this is all useless abstract philosophy, right? Why should I care if I have free will? And I believe this is the most naive question you could possibly make. It's like saying, who cares if I've ever made an authentic choice ever in my life? Who cares if all my sense of control is just an illusion? If you're wrong about this, then your entire model of reality is fundamentally broken. When I had this wrong understanding of my level of control, I had this constant overthinking brain. I had anxiety and was slightly depressed, as if there was no hope to be better. I felt I was always doing something wrong, and I was just, feeling awkward and out of place in almost any social situation. I second-guessed everything that I did. But now I can pull a middle finger at you and not even flinch. What an accomplishment. I'm making the big claim that if you have not learned how to love yourself yet, it is only because of a false understanding of what determinism is and isn't. So let's gain clarity. To go back to our hand experiment. From your perspective, I'm clearly the puppeteer, and the hand is my puppet. The disrespect comes from me, like as a body, and is directed at you. You have me as a meat suit to point to, which is like moving and appears to like be somewhat autonomous. And whatever I'm doing, you can count me responsible for it. But I could argue that from my perspective, I am the puppet and the universe is my puppeteer. Because although I understand your sense of responsibility you put over my choices, I don't really believe I could have chosen another finger. This was just, to me, the most fun way to illustrate the point. In this sense, my hand was forced. If you follow a purely scientific framework, free will is almost impossible. Experiments have shown that machines connected to the brain can predict a person's decision before they're consciously aware of choosing it. And then there are also split brain patients whose brains have been surgically divided down the middle. The right hemisphere starts making up justifications for what the left hemisphere is doing, neither side fully aware of the other. You end up with the same person arguing with themselves about why they made a certain choice. But it also doesn't have to be so abstract. If you truly look at your own decision-making process at the beginning of this video, and I believe that if you're honest about it, you can't really know why you made the decision. You are not different than the split brain patients. The decision just comes to you and then afterwards you justify it. But the moment of choice is rather spontaneous, isn't it? And this is why now we enter Psychedelic Mind land. Because it's not just a question of free will versus determinism. The question becomes whether this thing we call you is even real to begin with. If all we are is just a cluster of cells bound by cause and effect, then what is it that could possibly be the ultimate author of our decisions? There has to be like something independent that chooses everything else. As long as there are other parts that can exert control over something else, then there's no real freedom there. Scientific understanding of reality leads us to an almost spiritual notion of what the self is. Because it seems like our sense of self plus our agency is an utter illusion. Because we cannot prove either. On a biological level, this is you. It makes me feel super weird. It's as if we strip away all identifiers and only are left with raw biology. I don't feel identified with this. Imagine trying to find which brain of those is the one of your loved one, or which one is your own. Are we even real? It seems much more likely that we are like a stone in a river, Our sense of self is the stone, and the water flowing down the river is our experience passing us by. The stone believes it has control over the flow of the water because it redirects it, so it believes it is separate from it. I remember doing my first psychedelic trip 8 years ago. I just sat there looking at my finger, doing the simple motion, trying to figure out what is it that is making this complex decision process happening. It felt like raw magic. It was unpredictable. I could not localize the origin of choice. A friend of mine did the same finger meditation, but she stopped immediately because it quickly freaked her out. I could see it in her eyes. For a moment, it is as if she saw through an illusion and then quickly looked away because she wanted to feel in control again. But I think it's even more than that. It reassured her that she herself was real. Stoics figured out pretty early that happiness comes from understanding to which extent we have control. When you surrender control to the external environment, you become at peace with yourself. Because it's useless to change what cannot be changed. Therefore, acceptance and just focus in the present moment is happiness. But the $1 million question is, what even is external? A stone, clearly. Other humans, definitely. But my finger? To me, it's pretty arbitrary now if it's something that is external or if this is truly my identity. Like, if you cut off my finger, it's still kind of an external limb. Because my heart pumps blood, my lungs process the air, and my neurons fire at an incredible speed I'm not even aware of every second of my being. But then I take the credit. I think we humans are the most arrogant creatures in the universe. I don't even know how I'm doing any of this. All of this just happens. Everything just happens. And so often during my life, I honestly wish it didn't. I don't want to feel pain. It hurts so much to let go. To see people leave you. To somehow be alone in whatever you do. I wanted everything to stop. But no matter what I did, it just kept flowing. And honestly, I just said a moment ago that humans and stones are definitely external, but to be honest, I'm not even sure of that. Because everything is at the end an object of my mind. They get filtered through my experiences, and my perception of everything around me is just completely bound to like this meat suit. If I was born in a different family, I would have different people I care about, different friends, a completely different mind. Basically everything that I know would not be real. It's like all my life is just a dream and another illusion. I'm not sure if the difference between what's external and internal is so easily defined. Ultimately, it all is part of a river of experience. And now, determinism as a concept starts to become a bit shaky too. When at the beginning of this video I pointed my middle finger at you, I activated your default mode network. The default mode network is a network in our brains that is responsible for self-referential thinking. All our scientific knowledge seems to point to the fact that this is the part of the mind that creates the sense of internality and self. Activation of the default mode network correlates to thinking about yourself, the past and the future, to understanding the intentions of other minds, and is also heavily connected with, wait for it, anxiety and depression. Like, whenever you feel depressed, anxious or unhappy, just notice your mind doesn't stop thinking about yourself. It's also why narcissism makes us just so unhappy. The more narratives you spin about the past and your regrets, the more you ruminate about who you are and how others judge you and how you should be instead, the more the default mode network is active, the more it hurts to be you. Meditation and psychedelics have shown to turn that off. Also, any work that is externally oriented, like playing video games or doing sports, deactivates it. This is also how society tries to hypnotize us into just mindless consumers, distracting us with instant pleasure so we don't have to feel the void inside. So when you then suddenly snap back to reality, oh, there goes gravity, and you see how wasted your life has been. The default mode network goes berserk. To deepen the metaphor from earlier, the stone in the river is your ego, and the water droplets are all your sensations in your conscious experience, flowing from one moment to another. For example, if you right now don't like what I'm saying, or you haven't liked it way before that, then you have chosen another video. You clicked off this one, and despite how automatic it has happened, it feels like a choice that you made. It's like a ball of energy within you that bends reality into another direction. You want to stop it and control where it's flowing. The function of the ego is to resist stuff happening. The ego is a redirective mechanism. You can even see this reflected in language. When I say, I am hungry, I am basically identifying myself with the sensation of hunger. And the hunger moves my experience into a different direction. A direction with a full stomach and one more day to live. The moments I've hated myself the most were because of an over-obsession with my ego. I hated who I was, and I didn't like where I was going. In the worst cases, I really didn't want to exist at all. So in these states, I'm desiring a type of control over reality that is just not there. As if the stone wants to move, but it can't. One of the main pieces of advice you hear when talking about psychedelic drugs is to not try to control the trip, to be present and accept reality like a stoic god. And it fits perfectly, since psychedelics dissolve the ego. Fighting against what's happening becomes terrifying. It's swimming against the entire flow of the river at once. I got traumatized this way in 2021 when I had my first bad trip. I resisted an ego death, and the experience was just pure terror. Every sensation was made out of just pure suffering. It was so hellish. It was like a dam now, trying to block out all of the flow, but my entire structure was about to break in any second. I was holding on for my dear life. Then I broke, and I let go. And I became free from the sense of self, and I disappeared into pure harmony, as if all physical reality merged into one and the same. There was absolutely zero notion of control or distinctions with anything. Free will and determinism were both concepts that were utterly meaningless. There was just pure beingness. As I returned to ordinary consciousness, I had a lot of integration to do. And over time, I realized that the concept of determinism is also a complete delusion. I guess we should start to ask ourselves, what do we really mean when we say freedom? If an all-powerful God existed, would this God have free will, or would it also be bound by determinism? For a God to be truly free, there should be really nothing that he cannot do. Everything he wants happens. But this leads to this classical paradox of the question, can God create a stone so heavy that he can himself not lift it? But there is a clear solution to this paradox. In this hypothetical, God is still all-powerful because he can divide himself into limited forms. For example, God can become a cat, and now he cannot lift rocks anymore. He can now experience a bunch of cat things. So by dividing itself into fragments, it can make everything happen. It can experience literally everything. And I'd say now God is truly free, as it is not bound by anything. It would mean that his true nature is like an absolute formlessness or a no self. But why would God choose to be like a cat over a human or a tree over a stone? Like an all-powerful being without a clear sense of self can't have any bias. It would have to want to be everything equally. So it would make sense for everything to happen. It wants to know what it's like. It has to want to know what it's like, or it would not be all-powerful. Now let's extend this concept to the universe as we know it. Imagine the universe itself as God. A singular, all-encompassing entity. The universe expresses itself through countless limited forms. Galaxies, cats, rivers, hands, hearts. The universe, by definition, is everything that exists. But if it is everything, what could possibly be exerting control over it? It's controlling itself. And if something is controlling itself, it's free to be whatever it wants to be, in any meaningful sense of this word. Something that is has decided to be, but it's the ego which can see it. The ego doesn't want this to be true. Because the ego is there to resist stuff happening, to have a sense of separation with others. But when you drop the human ego, the universe stops being an accident. It stops being a machine that goes against you, but instead it becomes a being that has a resounding yes to existing. There was no puppet and no puppeteer. The stone is the river and the river is the stone. The divide between you and other, self and no self, free will and determinism, is ultimately meaningless. On a fundamental level, the universe is not happening to you, but you are it deciding to happen. This is ultimate freedom. The reason why most people get stuck in philosophy are antinomies. Antinomies are statements like, there is no absolute truth. This sentence contradicts itself. Antinomies blows wide open the inherent contradiction in logic, and we humans try to figure out everything just purely out of raw logic. But that's just not how reality is like. Ultimate reality is non-dual. The better you are at realizing that, the quicker you will transcend the limits of philosophy and yeah, just become an overall more flourishing human being. Because reality allows for contradictions. The same way that quantum mechanics and general mechanics are both true and both contradict each other. Knowing this can allow you to let go of past mistakes and still take on responsibility. You can call it cause and effect or karma or whatever, but your ego is still real. It's a structure in consciousness that changes your decision-making process. As abstract as the notion of a decision may be, when you do make a mistake, which is inevitable, you can then recognize this inevitability with acceptance. This is what the Stoics did, to misidentify you with the past and move with vision towards the future. So you can gain a bit of distance and not cling so tightly on things, because everything will disappear. You know that you will die. There's just no way of fighting against it. Everyone you love will die, including you, and everything that you hold dear to your heart is nothing but a dream that will fade away. But how do you confront this realization? Do you accept it and try to make the most of it, or do you cower in fear by recognizing your true nature? All this intellectual pondering is very nice, but actually living like this requires deep levels of self-awareness. If you're intrigued by these ideas and want to increase your level of self-awareness and be able to apply all of these spiritual, philosophical insights practically, I'm building a community on Discord. I'm calling it Existential Pathfinders community. And I want to help you, guide you through the mindfucks of what reality is. And my vision is to connect others who are equally fascinated about these topics and really have like a profound relationship to reality. Because most online spaces that talk either about philosophy are just super cold and don't really get the spiritual component. And spiritual people they just lose their minds and fall into superstition. So I would like to discuss these topics with tools that actually help people. There's a link in the description with a landing page. Just enter your name and email and I will send you an invite link. I'm really passionate about this project and I will do everything possible to build something very special over time. So join me to become further enlightened. See ya!